The new Princess S72 is a seriously interesting boat. It was introduced at the start of 2023 at the Düsseldorf Boat Show, and I think one of the best ways to understand its context in the Princess fleet is to consider it somewhere between the Flybridge equipped cruisers of the F-class and the really sporting cruisers of the V-class, but with the extra scale and volume and luxury of the entry point to the Princess Y-class. This is it, the S72. We've come down here to Plymouth to take it out for a sea trial and see exactly how she performs. The helm station of this S72 is a very pleasant place to be, I have to say. Now, quite often with Flybridge equipped boats, the lower helm is a bit compromised, but of course with this particular model being a sportbridge model, you've got the fly starts a good way aft. So above us we've got a nice big opening sunroof. That's not something you get on the Y-class, of course. So that's a very useful asset. The entire thing can slide way aft, so if you're heeling over in a turn, seeing to port is no problem at all. But in all honesty, visibility here is really very impressive, in spite of the fact that we've got this big skipper's door on the starboard side, and the fact this is not a one-piece screen. We've got a strut, a stanchion in the middle there. Visibility all round is really very good, both through these side windows here, the forward screen, and also particularly on the beam through these big one-piece windows that kind of frame the lounge a little further aft. Now we've got plenty of space at this helm for a trio of MFDs here, a big compass up on the dash top there and a lower tier with switch gear to the left hand side. The twin throttles of course on the right hand side there next to the tabs. Aside from that, there's not a tremendous amount to look at, and there really doesn't have to be. Now this, as I say, is the S-class boat, the S72, so it's got to be a decent driving machine. We'll just get her up to speed. Now this particular test boat is fitted with the more powerful engine options. That's a pair of MAN V12 1800s. You can also have the 1650s. Apparently that's good for round about 36 knots. But here today we're seeing in excess of 38 knots, pushing on towards 39. And we've got quite a lot of fuel on board here today as well. The standard tanks are 4,500 litres and they're 67% full, and we also have the range extending bow tank. That's another 900 litres, so a total capacity at least of 5,400 litres. A good bit of extra weight there. Apparently if we run in a little lighter, around about 25% fuel, we can expect to see in excess of 39 knots right up towards the 40 knot mark, which is a pretty good figure for a boat of this scale and also for a boat of this weight. I mean, it's in excess of 52 tons light. And as we get her up to speed there, I've not touched these trim tabs, but the trim is very good, very natural, very flat. As I say, visibility all round is fantastic, and because we have this single level deck here on this boat, on this main deck, visibility aft is very good too. In terms of efficiency, things seem pretty decent. At everything between 20 and 37 knots, and bear in mind this is topping out around about 38, 39 knots, so 37 knots is a very rapid cruise, but at everything between 20 and 37 knots we're seeing a usable range with 20% left in the tanks in excess of 200 nautical miles, between in fact 208 nautical miles and 293 nautical miles, so that's very generous, and that's without factoring in that extra 900 litres of capacity we have up there in the bow. Winds are running at around about 12 to 14 knots southwesterlies, and they're gusting to around about 22, 23 knots, so we've got some decent seas rolling in here from the southwest, and the boat's handling them very well indeed. There's arguably more in the way of volume than you'd necessarily want for a dedicated sea boat here, but that's of course because you want decent accommodation forward, and this boat shares the lower deck accommodation with the arrangement that we see on that Y72. So it's very much a worthwhile compromise. But as I say, in spite of all those winds, in spite of those seas, a natural trim is very impressive indeed. Just the odd little touch on the tabs here, just to correct her. We do also have a sea keeper on board, and that's spinning as we speak, doing its stuff. And this is an owner's boat, so we spec a sea keeper, but you can of course have Sleipner's vector fins on this boat as well. She's refined too. At everything from 20 knots right up to the top end, we're seeing between 65 and 75 decibels, which is certainly a very comfortable sort of level for you to have a chat if you're going long distance. And if you are choosing to go long distance, I particularly like the fact that not only do we have a co-pilot seat right here to keep you company, but we also got that nice little slightly elevated companion seating on the port side for 2 or 3 people just to face across, so you don't feel like you're exiled from the party if it's your job to be the skipper for the day. Well, we're safely back alongside now, and while we're in here it's worth having a quick look at the saloon. But first we'll start at the helm station itself. Now, as I say, plenty of space for 3 good sized MFDs. We also got the bonding system here. This is included on Princess yachts from 72 feet upwards, so this boat qualifies for that, and that basically means you can control all your boat systems from this single spot here. They've used this on a lot of platforms in the past, and it's a very trustworthy and effective system. What else we have here is a bit of adjustability for the helm seat, a manual adjustability, as you can see. Not so for the co-pilot seat, but of course you don't need to organise yourself around the helm controls when you're at the co-pilot seat, so that's by no means critical. We also have this nice big door on the starboard side to access that starboard side deck, and if we spin around and look upwards, you'll see that we have a set of skylights. Now, as I say, the fact that the Flybridge is set aft on these S-class models, and you can see that by the way the deck head dips a little as we moved aft around about amidships, it means that the forward part of that structure is available for this huge sunroof. Bathes this entire front section in light, and that's quite a cool thing, because if we look across to the port side, you'll see we've got that companion seating there, big enough I would say for 2 or 3 people. 3 might be a bit of a push, but very comfortable for 2. Take a couple of steps down from the helm, as you can see, 2 steps there and 2 steps back up to the companion seating, which is a potential trip hazard, except here Princess has underlit them, so they're very easy to see. That's not a problem at all. And if we step up here, you'll see that we've got little sockets to charge your gear, little trays to put your iPads and phones in, a couple of cup holders, and we also have this little switch which enables you to open that window on the port side for a bit of extra ventilation. No space for a door of course on this side, but this companion seating is a very nice touch. Really good to be able to keep the skipper company, and it also means that you can lounge facing aft and see the entire main deck spreading out beneath you. Now let's step further aft and take a look at that, because what I'm particularly interested in here is the fact that although we have the deck head dropping a touch to introduce space for that Flybridge further aft and sunken to maintain a good low slung profile, we still have an entirely single level deck all the way through to the cockpit. That's a really nice feature, that, and yet if I move aft and step beneath the point where the Flybridge kicks in, you'll still see I've got really good headroom there. I reckon I must have a good foot above my head, 7 foot, 7'2" perhaps. So in spite of the low profile lines of this boat, it certainly does look sexy from the exterior. It certainly doesn't feel like you're short of space in terms of headroom on this main deck saloon. Now, in terms of the basic arrangement, we have a really big C-shaped lounging station on the starboard side. That's really, really low level, underlit again, looks very cool. And we've got these wooden little shelving units built into that so that you can pop your snacks, your drinks down. But as on so many Princesses, you look around, everything's curved. Nothing sticks out with angles or edges. So it's a very easy boat to navigate without cracking your shins or your ankles or your knees on bits and bobs that you didn't anticipate. If we look above this lounge, you'll see we've got some tremendous windows there. Really deep, really big. Opens up the views, opens up the light. And actually, while we're looking at this furniture, this low-slung furniture here amidships, you'll see that this is a motif they use elsewhere, particularly up on that Flybridge and on the foredeck, just to keep that profile of that boat as low as possible. As I say, the S-Class is about sport as well as deck space, so that's an important part of the mix. Now on the port side, we've got a big cabinet unit here. Now there are options here, minor options, but quite useful ones. This is the standard fit out, so we've got storage in here. I think we've also got a wine cooler in here, yeah. Additional storage next to that. But if you like, you can sacrifice this section of the cabinet for an armchair that's kind of sunk into that space. So you can perch down in there and face across to the guys on that starboard seating. Moving further aft, we have an additional seating section, this time L-shaped, slightly raised. If I get down to deck level, you'll see it's raised compared to that relatively low level seating further forward. So I mean, realistically, none of this seating is particularly formal. It's all quite casual, all quite relaxed and inviting. But if you had to pick a section that was slightly more formal, I would suggest this would be it. We've got a fold-out table there, so you can easily sit 3, 4, 5 people around there for lunch. And directly opposite that, we have the galley. And as you can see, with this window section swung up and into place, and these 3-part doors slung across to the port side, it really is wide open. And of course it takes advantage of that by using an external bar to integrate the inside and outside spaces. And that integration is more than just physical actually, there's a kind of stylistic integration as well. If we come back forward and have a look at the way they've run the lighting here, built into the deck head, you'll see this lighting runs aft, splits into 2, and that pattern is continued aft as you go outside into the cockpit. So it really does feel like a very attractively integrated sort of space. And that's a pretty impressive galley too, I have to say. Not just an afterthought, this is the kind of space you could actually use as the hub of this main deck if cooking is your thing. We've got a 2-part sink forward. We've got a dry storage zone just here to the side of the hob top, and here's a 4-ring electric hob there. No gas options on large Princesses anymore. An oven down beneath that, plenty of storage solutions, and a big fridge and freezer way aft, as you would expect, with little catches to keep the doors shut at sea. There's your extractor fan above there. Decent views too, even from the galley. And if I look aft, you'll see we've got a little ice maker just at the aft end of that galley, looking out over the cockpit, which of course is exactly the space you would want it, so you can serve cold drinks to the guys out here. And if we work our way around and out into the cockpit, well, this again is very sociable. None of those inward facing kind of split settees that are so trendy now on a lot of large Flybridge cruisers. We have a relatively traditional wraparound C-shaped unit there, and here on the port side, standard fitting I think comes with a kind of serving station with a bit of storage and a fridge and space for the life raft underneath. This is the option, a little L-shaped seat, but I really like it, partly because it's got a little corner which people gravitate towards and find very comfortable. Also because it's in a kind of structural corner too, so when you're sitting here, even if you're doing 35, 38 knots, it's really sheltered, really comfortable. And of course, if I perch myself here and show you the eye line, you can see how sociable that is, facing across to the bar, across to the galley, further aft to that dinette. It's a very comfortable spot indeed, and certainly an option I would look to take. And as we look across to this dinette, it's worth noting actually that these 2 side pods, well, they're stuck down to the deck with little steel rods into retainers there, so you can release those and simply move these into the centre here. So you've got a more practical kind of solution for dining. But of course you could also, because they're relatively lightweight, move them down onto that stern platform and have an intimate little lunch down there. So it adds a useful bit of versatility to the layout back here. Now, what lovers of Princess's Y-Class will have noticed is that the saloon, relatively speaking, has been shortened compared to the Y72, and that enables this aft cockpit to be enlarged. And that kind of reveals what this S-Class boat is all about. It's not so much about vast internal volume, it's more about usable external day spaces. And it's certainly a very attractive cockpit. And it doesn't end there, of course, because as you can see, we've got a large raised sunbed back here. There'd also be a cushion for that. This boat is about to be shipped to Dusseldorf, so the cushions are all over the place at the moment. But this elevated platform is certainly big enough for 4 people. And as you can see from the starboard side, there will be raised headrests to keep you nice and comfortable. Orbited by nice sturdy grab rails with cup holders here too. And if we make our way down to the swim platform, this is another fundamental difference with the Y-Class. On the Y72 your tender would be here, but on the S-Class boat our tender is positioned inside this vast locker here. Of course, the fact that you've got engines on straight shafts means the engines are positioned a decent way forward, and this takes huge advantage of the vacated space aft. So you can fit anything up to a 3.9 metre tender in here, I believe, and there's space for plenty more besides. And under this little hatch here, built into the leading edge of that lid, well, when you raise that lid to about chest height, you can lift that hatch, and that's the perfect place for a couple of sea bobs. It's actually designed for that. So when you raise it halfway, you can lift sea bobs in or take them out at chest height, which is very comfortable. Now, to the side of that, this hatch is already open. This is your crew cabin. On the Y-Class, that would go transverse right across the transom. But here, it's fore and aft, and it's relatively compact, but it's very serviceable. Got a couple of full-size bunks here, one on either side. Good standing headroom, I mean vast standing headroom. I can't actually, if I stretch up, I can't actually even touch the deck heads. There's plenty of that. No hull windows. A little bit of natural light up top there from the porthole. And what we also get, if I open that up, is a little ensuite. Again, running fore and aft to make room for that big tender garage in the centre. And as you would expect, the toilet is located inside the shower itself. There are no options for this. It comes as a crew cabin, so if you don't want to take crew with you, then it really does do good service as an extra little spillover cabin, so you can accommodate 10 people rather than just 8. Now, this is not the only way in which the aft end of this boat is quite interesting. So let's pop round to the port side. We'll see a little hatch here, and we'll take a look beneath that in a second. First, we'll pop down into the engine bay, which is accessed through the cockpit there. On the Y-Class boat, you would expect to be able to access that via the crew cabin, but of course, the fact that we got that massive tender garage on board the S72 means that's not possible. But access is very good. I'll just step my way down into there. As you can see, what we have down here is a very compact engine room. Space for the 2 engines, of course, a pair of MAN V12 1800s. And then a bulkhead at the very point where you see the shafts disappearing aft. And if I look up, you'll see that this is the forward edge of that trough for the tender in that big tender garage. So it's quite an unusual setup. We've seen this before on the S-Class, but what it means and what we saw from the drive is that refinement is actually very good. When you get a huge cavernous engine room, it can sometimes reverberate and amplify engine noise. But this certainly works in its favour, and it also means that we're able to include here a dedicated engineering room further aft to the port side of that tender garage. We're going to have a look at that right now, because there's merit in that as well. Here's the hatch. Once you're down in here, you'll see it's not vast, and it was never going to be, given the fact we have that trough for the tender in the centre there. But as I say, there's plenty of merit to it. We've got space for the seakeeper, which is apparently what most people will pick in the S-Class in preference to fins. Here we have the generator. We've got battery boxes all around us back here. And another benefit of this, aside from the fact that you can come and operate these systems attend to these systems without being baked by your engines is the fact that if you come to anchor or you want to anchor overnight and sleep on board, you can run your generator, and the fact that it's separated by another bulkhead and another compartment from the accommodation which is further forward makes it all the more refined. As I say though, this boat is predominantly about open deck entertaining, so let's take a walk forward onto that foredeck and see what it's all about up there. As we do so, there is a little step up aft. There's another couple of steps forward, and we also have this. This is an option, but very much a worthwhile one. A neat little third helm on the port side, of course, because the helms on the Flybridge and on the main deck are both on the starboard side, so that's very well judged, and it gives you fantastic views both across to the starboard side and of course of the stern when you're mooring stern to in a Mediterranean marina. Moving forward, you'll see a couple of other features here that are distinct to 72 footers and above in the Princess line. As I say, bonding is one of them, that system at the helm, and another is this, the oval steelwork in the rails. Here incidentally is the diesel filler for that additional fuel tank down in the bow, that extra 900 litre capacity. And if we move forward, you'll see up in the forepeak these big heavy duty open top fair leads, very practical. That's for 72 footers and above because it's so useful on large boats in complex and busy marinas. But what I really want to look at up here is the nature of the seating. Now, as I say, this is very much a low profile boat. So the seating units here on the foredeck are super low, very low slung indeed. They barely come up above the mouldings around that side deck. They're versatile though. Just below the screen we have this C-shaped unit. Obviously that will come with a set of cushions and backrests. That's big enough, I would say, for 5 or 6 people, a low-level table. And opposite that, what we basically have is a big sun pad, a central island sunbed. You can lift these backrests up to face forward in comfort, or you can drop those down and lift these instead to face aft. And of course you can do that on both sides, so you can have a dining setup or a seating and sunbathing setup. It's quite practical. And in the centre here, if I lift this hatch, you'll see we have the option of a nice little cool box in there as well, so you don't have to head aft to get your drinks. But let's go back down the starboard side deck this time. As we'll do so, you'll see these little lockers on both sides. They're nice and big, great for your seamanship practicalities, your lines and your fenders. There's the water filler here. There's a symmetrical unit on the port side, and under there you'll see the outlet for your black water tank. We'll head further aft and pop up the steps to the Flybridge, because that follows a similar kind of principle, certainly in terms of the design and arrangement of its furniture. And as we get here to the Flybridge steps, I don't think I've seen a more generously angled set of Flybridge steps on a cruiser of this size. So they're so easy for anyone to get up and down. Really good rails as well. Nice big aperture, goes way aft. And you'll see this rail is because they're actually so shallow that when you're coming back down those steps, you don't have to climb down backwards in the naval style. You can actually walk forwards down those using the rails as you go. And when we get up here, I have to say the space is quite astonishing. Given that if I lean over the side, you'll see we're not taking up the full beam in the trawler style, and because it's a sport bridge and it begins a good distance aft, we're not encompassing the full space forward either. You see there's the sunroof above the helm. So it's quite difficult to understand how this Flybridge feels so vast, but actually, again, the arrangement of the furniture is very clever. We have the galley positioned right at the aft end here to keep it well out of the way. We've got a sink there, as you would expect, and we've also got a decent electric griddle plus storage underneath. There's no refrigeration in there, but if I move over to the starboard side where we accessed this Flybridge from those steps, you'll see we've got a lovely big space in here, a drained compartment, a huge fridge section. So there's going to be no shortage of drinks up on the Flybridge. But I think what really makes this place feel so big and open, again, is because we have such low level furniture, and it's all around the periphery, leaving lots of this deck space open. And of course we don't have a hardtop here, it's wide open. Instead we've got a bimini wrapped around the leading edge there and kept nice and firm by the hydraulic struts when you're underway. It makes lots of sense, and for a lot of people that will be sufficient. And certainly in terms of the aesthetic of this boat, it certainly helps not to have that extra vertical elevation. And in terms of the way this Flybridge feels, as I say, I've rarely been on one of this size that felt so large and so open. It's very impressive indeed. If we move over to the helm station, you'll see that we've got some quite widely spaced seats here, the skipper on the port side, co-pilot on the starboard side. It means the co-pilot can access his seat, get in and out without disturbing the guy at the helm. But in all regards, this is every bit as well spec'd as the lower helm. Virtually a mirror image in a lot of ways, except for the fact that there are fewer buttons on that port side. And if we look across to port, again, companion seating is very well taken care of here. There's space again for 2 or 3 people, and this time there's a forward cushion, which means you can sit yourself up against that and face aft with your feet up, use it as a chaise longue. But if I look down, you'll see that we've also got a lip in here right the way around the edge, and that of course is for an infill, so you can turn that into a forward sun pad. So that leaves just the accommodation to investigate. So we'll do that right now, head down to the lower deck, and as we do so, it's worth noting that this boat actually shares exactly the same lower deck layout as the Y72. So we know what to expect, and we know we're going to enjoy it. Now we head down between the companion seating and the helm station forward to a central companionway with 3 cabins. A VIP cabin in the V of the bow and a twin both to port and to starboard. But it's quite an ingenious arrangement, as we'll see in a second. Now let's head forward first. As you can see, we've got a raised double bed in the centre there, high level storage, and long narrow windows at the right sort of level from the bed to have a good view of that horizon. Storage units built in here, and there you'll see another feature unique to 72 footers and above is the fact that they have quite high-end 9 stereo systems on board these boats, zoned of course as you'd expect. On the starboard side we've got some really good hanging storage, big capacity that. And the finish in here is a satin walnut. It's the darkest finish. There are also various oak finishes as well, and you can have those in satin or gloss. But this is quite a cool modern finish actually. It certainly doesn't feel oppressively dark, and the mix of fabrics and materials feels really quite impressive on this boat. It's a pleasant place to be. There's a big TV built into that aft bulkhead, and the ensuite facilities are on the starboard side, neatly angled to make best use of space. We've seen these sink units on various Princess models before. It's really impressive stuff. It's so tactile. Lots of mirrors, and if I look behind the door here, you'll see there's a separate toilet down there, plus a really good size of shower with a rain shower up above, and that takes a decent distance, a decent amount of space behind it in order to fit one of those. So that's an impressive feature on a boat of this scale. If we move out of there and swing round back into that central corridor, you'll see we have some well-placed storage there for your towels and linens and so on, with a washer dryer down below. It's in the ideal space, and although that does cut down the volume in that starboard ensuite, you don't really notice it. It's just tucked to the side at the apex between the toilet and the shower. So it's very neatly done, that. Now behind that we have a twin cabin on the starboard side. Those beds are perfectly decent, and we have a little step down here, as you can see, to get in, which means headroom again is wonderful. And if we look aft, you'll see that the deck head does drop down very substantially, but as it does, it's married to another step down. So actually when you get under there towards the head end of the bed, if I turn the camera around again, we've got, I reckon, 6'3" perhaps to play with, which is really good. And this is great too. if the scale of the windows in that forward cabin are slightly mean in terms of their depth, well, these are massive with twin portholes too. And of course there's loads of space to sit up in bed and read and enjoy that view. It's very much a place you'd come down just to chill out for a spell rather than merely to sleep. And we also have more hanging storage and a very well placed mirror there too. What I like about the arrangement though, if we move over to the port side, is the fact that if I open this first, you'll see this is the day heads. And you'll see that it's relatively transverse, which means it occupies very little distance in terms of its fore and aft arrangement. And that in turn, if I close that up and move to the port cabin, means that this entire port cabin can be shifted a little way forward to create extra space aft, which Princess has used for a private staircase down to the owner's cabin amidships. So that's a really, really handy bit of ingenuity in terms of the deck layout. Again though, these are full-size beds. Again, you get a huge window, and if I look down under here, you'll see that we also have good storage compartments beneath these beds, pull-out drawers, and at the table at the head end there, plus hanging storage. And again, even though we have the deck head dropping down, we have the step compensating for that. So in terms of its ergonomics, it's a fantastic space. But if we move out of there now and head back up into the saloon and look to the port side, you'll see that this is the private owner's staircase. That shorter heads compartment on the port side enables the Princess designers to factor into the layout of this boat. It's a very welcome feature indeed. As we go down there, you'll see that the steps are beautifully lit. We've got more of this soft touch lining on the bulkheads, which looks very good. Soaks up a bit of the noise too. And as we go down, we see some storage spaces in here. Ideal for wine, bits and bobs. And if we spin around again, when we get to the bottom of the stairs, there's good storage here too for your baggage, for your suitcases if you're going on a long trip. Ahead of us is a big mirror, quite useful in its own right, but that hides the aft end of that starboard twin cabin. And if we step into the owner's cabin itself, I'm sorry about the mess, as I say, this boat is being sorted out to be shipped to Dusseldorf very, very shortly indeed. But you can see, in spite of that mess, what a good space this is. Now, as you expect, there's a central bed, a big king-size bed in the centre there. On the starboard side, we've got a built-in settee, big enough for 2 or 3, with a huge window, even bigger than those in the guest cabins slightly further forward. Really generous size, more storage, a TV, a large TV built into that forward bulkhead. And there are bedside tables integrated into that unit. If we look across to the port side, close this door over, give ourselves a better view. There's a very attractive cabinet here at the leading edge of that section. More storage underneath, and a really neat little setup here that you can use either as an office. You've got little sockets there for your equipment, or you can use it as a dressing table with a handy bit of storage under there too. Again, a massive window, and as you'd expect, at the aft end we have a transverse heads compartment, ensuite facilities running across there to separate you from those engines. And it's quite ingenious the way they've arranged this. So if we move in on the port side and look across, you'll see we've got plenty of storage on that port side with automatic lighting, hanging storage, plenty more storage beneath that unit as well, and slide out drawers. And if we open this door and look across to the starboard side now, there are your ensuite facilities. Very useful for protecting you from the sound of the engines if they're running for any reason while you're down here, because of course being shaft drive model, those engines are very close to this bulkhead here. But as you'd expect, his and her sinks, beautifully done, a separate toilet, and a really good size of shower in there, again with a rain shower, and again with a massive window so you can enjoy the view. this then is really quite an impressive boat. I mean, after all, if you're coming up with a design for a sportbridge model and you're dropping that flybridge down and shifting it further aft and reducing its footprint, you need to make sure that the boat you create is great to look at and brilliant to drive. And this nails that brief on both counts. But of course, when you go up to that flybridge, you don't feel in any way shortchanged. It's a genuinely spacious and pleasant place to be. And then you step to the back end and you see that enormous tender garage, something the Y-Class doesn't provide. So you know that you've got that entire swim platform free for dedicated water sports. In short then, I think this boat has the capacity to appeal both to relatively conservative existing Princess owners who have enjoyed what the brand has done in the past, and also to relatively youthful newcomers who are just investigating what the brand is all about. And that being the case, I wouldn't be surprised if this particular model outsold its nearest equivalent models in the F, the V and the Y-Class lines by quite some distance.